Hello guys, Wave Nunnally here with Bible Unplugged again. Thank you for joining us again for another session of studying God's Word. We're coming out of a series on the miracles of Jesus. Now we want to begin to turn our attention toward the subject of the giving of thanks. Thanksgiving to God is always appropriate for His various incredible character attributes, and also for the incredible things that He does in our lives. So in the next few sessions, we're going to be doing a series on the giving of thanks. This particular first installment in this series is giving thanks for the place that God caused His name to dwell. I'm playing off of a passage in the book of Deuteronomy, and we're referring specifically to the land of Israel, and even more specifically, the city of Jerusalem. So it gives us a wonderful opportunity to wed two things: the season, the time, the appropriate response to God's goodness of the giving of thanks, and then opportunities to join together and learn more about the playing board, the land of the Bible, the place where these events actually took place. Just to get warmed up and to get into the spirit of thanksgiving, let's take a look at a couple of Bible passages. In Psalm 42, it says, "These things I remember, and I pour out my soul within me, because I used to go along with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God." He's describing the triannual feasts, 3 times a year, all Israelites going up to worship God together and celebrate His goodness in Jerusalem and at the temple. "I used to go along with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with the voice of joy and with the voice of thanksgiving," the giving of thanks, a multitude of people keeping festival. Another passage totally relevant for our study today is Zechariah chapter 2. This prophet is predicting a return, a restoration of God's people in the future, a renewal, if you will, a return to the land of Israel, and a restoration of the covenant, the glory, the blessing, the presence of God's people. With God's people. In Zechariah it says, "And Yahweh will bless Judah," the tribe of David and the place where the temple is located. "He will possess Judah as His own portion, and in the Holy Land, the Adamat HaKodesh," as we see down below in the Hebrew and in yellow print there. Adamat HaKodesh, the Holy Land, and will again choose, and God zeroes more specifically from the Holy Land into this particular place of His dwelling presence in the temple, the city of Jerusalem. That passage that we began with, this place that the Lord your God will choose for His name to dwell, is a very important component of the book of Deuteronomy, and from that point onward in ancient Israel's history. God will manifest His glory all over the place. The heavens declare the glory of God. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and all of we who dwell therein. The whole earth is filled with His glory. These are phrases that we hear from various Bible passages throughout the Hebrew Bible, but in Deuteronomy it says that very specifically God chooses to manifest His presence in Israel, in Jerusalem, and on the Temple Mount. Now, I'd like to, for this next part of our study together today, what I would like to do is kind of wed lots of biblical events with the actual locations where they happened. And there's no place more central to biblical events than the city of Jerusalem. I really give thanks to God for the fact that He saw fit to take us, my family, to Jerusalem, and there we lived. I studied, did the first master's degree that I did there. It was there that my journey began that basically leads us to this point and to this relationship of sharing God's Word in this relatively unique way that we do. And so as we process through the city of Jerusalem and areas around, places around the city of Jerusalem that have very important biblical events associated with them, then I want you to begin to give thanks with me that we serve a God who guides and directs our personal lives, who opens and closes doors, as we find in the book of Revelation, as He sees fit to lead us into the paths that are going to be the most fruitful, the most effective for us to live our lives, live satisfying and fruitful lives, and be pleasing to Him. So this first place that we're going to visit, we're going to be looking at Jerusalem from the northwest and looking toward the northeast. And I want you to just notice a few things before we even begin in this portion of our study. One is that you'll notice a really large area where lots of streets come together here on the north side of Jerusalem. The reason for that is this area right here is the area of what is called the Damascus Gate that points toward Damascus. Or in Hebrew, it's called the Shechem Gate because it points directly north toward Shechem. You see, and I'm just going to, before we even begin to move the video, I want to point out some really basic places, big picture as well as small picture. So right here by this northern area, gate of Jerusalem, there is a clump of trees here that constitutes what is called the Garden Tomb. It's a favorite place of Protestants who visit the land of Israel. I'm sure that you've heard of the Garden Tomb. In relation to the city of Jerusalem, this is the place where Charles Gordon identified as Golgotha. And then on the backside, right about here, is where the Garden Tomb itself is situated. You can see here the city wall that goes around Jerusalem. It runs all the way around the what's called the Old City of Jerusalem, 2.5 miles in length. And inside is the Old City, and then you even see the Temple Mount. This is what I would like for us in our study today to use as our point of orientation, sort of the center of our compass. Whenever we are changing videos, then the first thing that you're going to want to look at is the city of Jerusalem, because that's going to help orient you to where you are in light of or in comparison to the Temple Mount. Also, you have this very long ridge that's running north-south, more or less parallel with the eastern edge of Jerusalem, and this is the Mount of Olives. It's not a single mountain peak, it is a ridge, a mountain ridge. Behind that, you can see at the very bottom of the Mount of Olives is the Garden of Gethsemane, right here where my cursor is, right next to the Church of All Nations. And so the Garden of Gethsemane, in Hebrew, it means the press for olive oil, which makes total sense because it's on the Mount of Olives. Behind the Mount of Olives, there are two important villages. One is in this area here, and it's the village of Bethphage, or Beit Pagi, as is said in Hebrew. Bethphage, where in Matthew 21, Jesus spoke to the fig tree and it withered. Another important site is just to the southeast of Bethphage. It goes across a little saddle right here and over to the next ridge, and that is Bethany, where Jesus was anointed for his burial by the woman who came in from the city and wet his feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. This is where Jesus stayed with Mary and Martha. This is also the place of the tomb of Lazarus and where Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. From Bethany, we're going to kind of use that as our jumping off point to go further east. And I want you to notice that there is a road that runs in this direction down this ridge. You kind of lose it a little bit there, but eventually you see it come out very clearly right here. I'm tracing it with the finger of my pointer, and that is the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. In fact, in this particular video, you can see this circular oasis down in the Jordan Valley, and that is the city of Jericho. In between the Mount of Olives and Jericho, this vast expanse, it's 15 miles wide, this area that looks very desolate. There's no inhabitation there, very little rainfall, so very little vegetation is growing there. This is the wilderness of Judea, or the wilderness of Judah. Think of Matthew chapter 3 and where John the Baptist began his ministry in the wilderness of Judah. If you can continue looking to the east, you see the area of Jericho, and Jericho is sitting in a valley. That is the valley of the Jordan River, so we call it the Jordan Valley. Even further to the south, you can see a very thin blue strip right here, and this is the Dead Sea. So I think that you've got your real big picture basics covered, and now we're going to go ahead and start the video, and we'll point out some things as we process through it. I hope you enjoy it. We're moving to the south. We started on the north side of Jerusalem. There's the city wall here. This is the compound of Notre Dame, a wonderful place to stay when you're in Jerusalem. And now we have lined up the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the burial place of Jesus, the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock, and the Mount of Olives. And this spire here, this tower, is the bell tower of the Church of the Ascension, the Chapel of the Ascension, and the Russian Orthodox Convent of the Ascension. We're continuing to move now down the west side of Old Jerusalem. You see the city wall here. And this is what is called the Jaffa Gate. Some of you have heard of that before. It's the major west gate of the western part of Jerusalem. And then there are a series of towers. These towers are protective devices built by Herod the Great, who built a gigantic palace for himself right here. According to Mark 15:16, this is the location where Jesus was taken before Pilate at the Praetorium, which is the palace, and where Jesus was tried by that Roman governor, the descendants of Herod being now booted out at this particular point. We're flying over top of what is called the Hinnom or Gehenna Valley that forms the western as well as the southern border of the area of the old city. And I'm going to stop the video right here for just a moment because I want to look at a couple of sites in particular. One would be the Roman Catholic cemetery of Jerusalem. This is important for a number of reasons, not the least of which Oskar Schindler of Schindler's List is buried in this particular graveyard. There is another graveyard just across this road and up the hill for Anglicans. It's the British cemetery from the British Mandate period. A couple of people that you might know by name, Sir Flinders Petrie is the father of modern archaeology, is buried there. Maybe more importantly for us, Horatio Spafford is buried there, the author of It Is Well With My Soul. This compound is controlled by the owners and operators of this building right here. This is Jerusalem University College. This is the place where I went to school in 1982, 1983. We lived in Israel, and I was doing a master's degree in Hebrew language there. I pointed out because this is more or less the launch pad that led me down the path to Jewish backgrounds of the New Testament, specifically the Gospels and the life of Jesus. Began studying Hebrew, Dead Sea Scrolls, the literature of the early rabbis, apocryphal, pseudepigraphical, Josephus, and all that stuff. All of that begins at Jerusalem University College for me. So for those of you who have been drinking from this well, then the reason why I bring what I bring to the table, so much of that tracks back to Jerusalem University College. Moral of the story, it's still running today. There are still students there studying. Even during COVID, they're still open. They're doing online stuff, but they've also got a group of hardy students that had the kind of visas and the like to be able to get into and stay in the country. And so there are still students studying there. They're still doing the kind of stuff that they did when I studied there in the early 1980s. I've visited there on a number of occasions and given guest lectures. There's another one that is scheduled for the month of January coming up. This is a place that is like no other. It is an evangelical institution, permanently situated in the land of Israel. It tracks back to the 1950s in its origin, has trained hundreds and thousands of students in language and archaeology and geography, history, literature, and the like, and their work is ongoing. It's not easy because there are so few students now, and because so many of the supporting institutions, and there are more than 200 associated institutions around the world, they're having troubles of their own, financial, in terms of dealing with COVID and the loss of students and funds and the like. So if you've got nieces and nephews, if you've got children, grandchildren that would be interested in pursuing a course of study on the Scriptures, there is no better place to contextualize the message of God's Word than to start that right there. You don't have to do a degree. You can do a semester abroad. You can do a year abroad. You can even do a short-term program, and these things will count toward whatever program they're a part of. They can transfer those credits back to those schools. In addition to sending those that you have the opportunity to influence, as far as investing in the land of Israel and God's work in raising up people to teach and preach His Word with effectiveness, with clarity, with real intended context, I can't think of another place to invest. If you've got some year-end funds that you would like to channel to an educational institution, international, overseas, I would recommend Jerusalem University College. You'll find their website online. They're very easy to find. Let's go back to our video now. We talked about the Hinnom Valley running on the west side of Jerusalem, and then as the city wall bends and goes toward the east, then so also does the Hinnom Valley. In other words, the contour of the city follows the valley system that created it. And so it's an important point to note that all cities are concerned about defense, and Jerusalem not the least of these. We're looking now past the Hinnom Valley to an area that connects with another valley. It's called the Kidron. We'll see it in another video very shortly. Again, the Mount of Olives is to our east, the Judean wilderness, or the wilderness of Judah, the Jordan Valley, including the city of Jericho, and just off of our screen here, the Dead Sea. On the backside of the Mount of Olives, we get the village of Bethphage, and we get the city of the village of Bethany. We're going to go on, move forward to the next video. This video starts from the southeast. It's the exact opposite of what we did a moment ago. We started the first video in the northwest quadrant. Now we're looking at the southeast quadrant. It's just a little bit different look and will give us an opportunity to see some different things. So we'll go ahead and start. This is the Hinnom Valley here. This is the Kidron Valley here. And they all come together at a place that the Bible calls Ein Rogel, the Spring of Rogel, where the rival of Solomon, Adonijah, a brother, had himself coronated king. In that same area, you see this deep ditch or ravine. This is the pool of Siloam. In this particular video, it isn't excavated, but later it was discovered in 2004 by my friend Eli Shukron, who excavated a large portion of it, and we visit it every time that we go to travel and study in the land of Israel. Let's start the video. This little narrow finger right here is Jerusalem of David's time and of the Jebusites before him. It's only 6 acres as compared to the Temple Mount, which is 35 acres in size. That will help you to put the entire city of Jerusalem in its proper perspective. If the Temple Mount is 35 acres, then you can multiply that times about 3, and you get the size of Jerusalem outside of the Temple Mount. Again, we're following along the Kidron Valley, so we're really flying over top of the Mount of Olives right now, looking across Jerusalem to the west. I'm going to, in just a second, stop the video, and we're going to talk about this valley system right here, which starts out as the Valley of Rephaim, and then eventually turns, the name changes to the Soric Valley. And I'd like to just discuss that with you briefly. Now we have the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock right in the middle, and if you follow from where we sit right here on the top of the Mount of Olives, across the Kidron Valley, you can see the very tip, the very edge of the roof of the Church of All Nations, which means that the Garden of Gethsemane is right in the area where I'm circling with my cursor. You continue across the Mount of Olives. Notice there's still olive trees on the other side of the Kidron Valley from the Mount of Olives. So this is simply the kind of agriculture that grows best in this area. Graveyards, an Islamic graveyard here, a Jewish graveyard here, all associated with that final day of judgment mentioned in the prophecy of Joel. So you look across the Kidron Valley to the Temple Mount, 35 acres in size, over the Dome of the Rock, continue on beyond the edge of the old city. We have to cross the Hinnom Valley, or what Jesus called Gehenna, Ge-Hinnom. It turns into Greek into Gehenna. The Valley of Hinnom, go up the new city, the new part of Jerusalem, to the area where the patriarchs traveled north and south. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob used this ridge route right here. And right on the backside of that ridge is a valley called the Valley of Rephaim, or in Hebrew, Emek Rephaim. Emek Rephaim is important for a number of reasons. One, right after David had conquered this little city, 6 acres, called Jebus, and now it's known as Jerusalem, and it becomes David's capital of a united kingdom of consisting of all 12 tribes. The Philistines, the arch enemies of Israel over the centuries, wanted to topple this fledgling, this new monarchy. And so 2 different times in the book of 2 Samuel, the Philistines sneaked up to the very edge of Jerusalem. It says they came up through the Valley of Rephaim and attempted to attack Jerusalem. Before they could even get to the city, though, David had led his troops out and successfully defended his new capital. You may remember the story in 2 Samuel where David is consulting the Lord, which is always a good idea. The more dire the situation, the more important it is. But David says, Lord, do I go up against the Philistines? And the Lord said, yes, go up. Okay, well, when do I go up? And the Lord Lord said, when you see the wind rustling the myrtle trees, that story happens here in that valley of Rephaim. There's another important point, and I talked to you a moment ago in a previous video. I'm just going to leave the cursor there. It'll go away eventually on its own. But the valley, the beginnings, parts of the valley of Rephaim that then turn into the Soric Valley. As I spoke of Jerusalem University College, I talked about my education beginning there. The fact that I drank from such rich well springs like Chaim Rabin, like Hal Ronning, Jim Monson, Anson Rainey, these people that taught me, Yeshayahu Gafni, these guys that taught me this stuff that I'm now able to apply to the richness of God's Word. I so appreciate that part of my Jerusalem experience. In fact, I give thanks to God for guiding and directing me and my young family to sell everything that we had except the beat-up old Volkswagen Beetle, the old kind of Beetle, not the newer ones. And we strapped the college trunks on the front bumper and the back bumper, and we drove until we got to my parents' house, who then took us to JFK to fly to Israel. And we had everything that we were able to bring in those 2 college trunks. And when we moved to Israel, we went as a family. We had that vision, that burden from the Lord. And I wasn't going to go on my own. We'd only been married a few years. We had a young son who was 2 years old. He turned 3 while we were there. Just a little boy, a precious little blonde-haired boy. And but we had the call of God on our hearts. And my wife was so much a part of this experience. We lived in the valley of Rephaim. That's where I had to walk from there to Jerusalem University College each day, usually carrying a pillowcase full of dirty laundry over one shoulder and then a bag full of books on the other shoulder. And sometimes I would walk in the middle of the night. I would get to Jerusalem University College way before the dawn broke. I remember Dr. George Jacomakis, who was the president of Jerusalem University College back in those days. Something disturbed his sleep. He got up, and his apartment adjoined the library, and he got up and walked in. He turned the lights on, and it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and he was startled to see me sitting there. I'd been out of college for a number of years, working for the telephone company, putting up cable, climbing telephone poles, and just trying to make a living for my family until we moved to Israel. So I was used to early rising, and I was used to working hard, and I had to do what I had to do. So sometimes you got up before the cock crow, and you slept across Jerusalem, and you carried your bags, books, and dirty laundry, and I would do the laundry and hang it out on an old clothesline there, just trying to help my wife, because my wife was full bore, pedal to the metal into this. She had to shop at different stores for meat and for dairy because of kosher considerations. She had to get her plasticware and her, home supplies all at different stores. We'd often wait until Shabbat, or the beginning of the Sabbath, till just before Shabbat, and then we would go to the market because we were living so meagerly. I think our budget was $700 total budget per month, and that included rent, it included food, it included travel, it included insurance, health care, everything. And so she learned how to hit those markets right before the Sabbath began, right before Shabbat, when the prices would go down, and sometimes people would even, the vendors would even take their vegetables, knowing that they were going to wilt over the weekend before the shops opened again, and they would throw them over into dumpsters. And so we indeed would look through dumpsters, and we would also get the things that were the cheapest, what was in season, and that's the way that we lived. But God was faithful. Our home church, our sending church, Southside Assembly of God in Jackson, Mississippi, those people got behind us and they prayed for us and they gave to us. And money that came in from my family, from her family, from stuff that we'd saved, cars that people had given to us that we had sold, and then these monthly pieces of support that would come in. I recall on a couple of different occasions, we would sit in the kitchen in our apartment that cost $300 a month in West Jerusalem, in Emek Rephaim, the Valley of Rephaim, and we would put whatever money that we had in cash on the table, and we would divide it out. And I remember one month we had a 5 shekel piece. That amounts to about $1 today, $1.25. One time we had a 10 shekel piece and a couple of agorot. That was all that was left over. And in the beauty of that poverty, we saw the hand of God. We saw Him provide for us on a daily basis. He gave us our daily bread. I give thanks to Him for that. I give praise to Him because He's worthy as an incredible guide, but also as an incredible provider. And I give thanks to a wife who was willing to yoke together with me in the vision of what God would eventually do with us, what He would eventually do through us. And we knew that we were sowing good seed, and we knew that God had called us, and it was light work. These were light burdens. We came home, I remember I weighed 137 pounds when I got off the plane in New York whenever we returned from living in Israel. We lived very meagerly, but God did some incredible things in this city with these people and in this particular area of biblical study. And I'm so proud of what He's done that I want to stop, and if you would like to join me, give thanks to the God of Jerusalem, to give thanks to Jerusalem, the city, and to give thanks to the people of Jerusalem. You know, and I've belabored this point about the difficulties. The land of Israel is difficult. Deuteronomy chapter 11 says this land is a land that's filled with giants, but stick with God and you'll overcome them. This land is not like the land of Egypt that you came to, where you could simply water your garden with your foot. But this land has to drink its water from the rains of heaven. Yes, this is a difficult land, but let me assure you of this. The price that this land extracted from us, the price that this land will extract from you, should you choose to go and study there, I can guarantee you will be far eclipsed by the goodness, the blessing that this land, this people, this Bible that comes from this place will sow into your life. And that's a guarantee. Happened with me, and it's happened with everybody, thousands of people that I've had the privilege of instructing in the land of the Bible.